My name is Sophie and this is Jarrod, and we come from a Gadigal-based studio that is a collective of artists and technologists. And we make kind of digital and physical, interactive and immersive works in the cultural sector. So do things in museums, some things at concerts. We also both have personal practices that intersect with the work that we do for junior major. And I think like many people who are in this space, our work with technology, our work professionally, our work artistically is all like very interwoven. Actually, as interwoven as the like 400 different softwares that we're always using. So I thought a nice way to start this would be we will talk about like our own practices because they are quite DIY. They're like very like one person can do it, and perhaps one person with not very much money can do it. And then we'll talk about the junior major work, which is a bit grander in scale. And that's sort of what this practice can look like if you're joining together lots of different people with different skill sets and kind of working in more like bigger public places. And then we're gonna do a little bit of a TouchDesigner workshop. We chose TouchDesigner because we have both used it, which is an advantage. It's free, and as a piece of software, it can intersect with so many different things. You can use, it's so good. You can use it like, people use it with Ableton and make their own live visuals. People use it as like software that interacts with like LED lighting installations. You can just do anything with TouchDesigner, and that, and also it being free felt like the right one for us to bring to you today. So I'm going to start off talking a little bit about my personal practice. Sophie. I'm going to go back and go forward. So this is a work that I made in 2021 for a performing arts festival in Sydney called Liveworks that is run by Performance Space. And Liveworks is great because it's very like messy and people are like often staging things for the first time. It was a 35-minute live streamed video essay about loading screens as a visual metaphor for late stage capitalism. And I made it because one time I was perhaps a little bit drunk and was like watching the Uber Eats like logo as it was delivering me food. And I was thinking, wow, this is so dark because like it's giving me these graphics that are implying that food is being prepared and being packaged so that I feel more in control of this experience, but actually like that graphic interface has no real connection to the actual food that I'm getting. And then once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I had an Apple Watch and it was like tracking my period, and I was like, my period is loading, my menstrual cycle is loading. And once and then my boss wanted to introduce Monday.com, and I was like, you are turning all of our labor into a loading screen. So I did what any good artist did, and on company time started writing a script for a live stream video essay. This one was pretty maniacal. I had just started learning Cinema 4D. I was like a Photoshop to After Effects girly, and then Cinema 4D was like a big leap for me. So I built a lot of these kind of abstract, very kitschy like landscapes in Cinema 4D, and then we green screened me on top of them. And so it was like me on a green screen going through a laptop that had OBS, like filtering out the green screen into QLab, which was like triggering all the scenes into another laptop that was like live streaming it out. It was like, at that time, it was the biggest thing I had ever done in my own practice. And compared to the work we do at junior major, it's so scrappy. It's like 3 dudes that are like my friends, my now husband, and like everyone's being paid below minimum wage in vibes. But I'm really proud of it because I think that it was everything that it used was like almost like consumer facing. And everyone who was making it were making it like kind of like DIY artists, but also like we were very heavily influenced by Twitch streamers, and it just felt like so live and such a live part of like the materiality of making digital things. And it was chaotic, and I love silliness. So then this was a couple years after, and this one uses Cinema 4D, After Effects, and TouchDesigner. So this was cool. This one is called Robot Dog, and it was essentially like an allegory for machine learning using dogs. Because I was like, oh, dogs are in the home, dogs are being used by the police state, so is AI, and that's enough to make it work. So this was really cool because I got this like great TouchDesigner plugin, and then I built on that so that it was like tracking dogs in different scenes, and that was the start of it. And then I built this kind of like dog monument in like Cinema 4D, and then every now and again it would like stop at a point in the monument, and like I would pop up on like a little screen and tell you more about why AI is dogs, I guess. This one is cool because I made it in 2023, and it was like before ChatGPT had like really taken off and people had become like really afraid. And so now curators love this work. This work gets shown all the time. So, you know, if you find something scary, make a work on it early because the exhibitions will come. And this is like the last in this sort of, I guess, journey of like using different tools for my practice. I became really jealous of physical artists because they make physical things, and they have these like selfies in their studio where they're like covered in paint. And digital artists don't really get that. Occasionally I get like a selfie in a server rack, but it's like definitely not as sexy, and there's no natural light. So I decided to start trying to make objects and 3D print them. I made a model in Cinema 4D, and I sent it to this dude on Instagram who was like a friend of a friend who had a 3D printer, and he was like, I couldn't print that, that will never print. And then I sent it to a 3D printing like company, and they were like, yeah, we can print that for $800. And I was like, no, but I want like 12 of them. And then the Boxing Day sales came just as I had gotten an invoice paid. And it turned out that for the mere cost of like 3 of those professional prints, I could buy a 3D printer. So I bought a 3D printer, and the dude was right. The model I sent him wouldn't have printed. But it was like kind of another expansion of this digital practice where I was like making things in Cinema 4D, and then I was printing them, but then it turned out that there was so much finishing that had to go with them. So I was also like sanding and painting and spraying, and it made for like really good Instagram content because it is really hot. But I think it was also like another moment where the digital like methods that I was using were like reworking back into the way the work looked, in the same way that, you know, with that first like live stream work, so much of that aesthetic was like dictated by my very average Cinema 4D skills. So much of the like the aesthetic of this was dictated by what I could get my 3D printer to print and how it might work. In the middle, I have this like screen grab from the video that went with this show to show that I, you know, can still make videos. All of this is to say that I have never been taught any of these things by an actual adult. I have been taught all of them by YouTube tutorials and random dudes on Instagram who love to tell you what you're doing wrong whenever you share any kind of in progress. And the very generous Pat, who is neither of those things, but has also been incredible on my journey in all these technologies. I think that there is something really exciting about working with these technologies. There's something so exciting about working in this space. There's a liveness in like, and a collaboration with the tools. There's a liveness and a collaboration with everyone else who is working with these tools because they are changing all the time. And that is something that has like really impacted the like way that I make, and I think the way that you make, and the way that like that gets scaled on like a studio level. And now, Jarrod.
So I'm a little bit newer to my practices than Sophie, and so they're a little bit less cohesive, but I wanted to pick a couple of things that I think really demonstrate what we're trying to get across in this session. So I've got a technical background. I did mechatronic engineering at uni, and I think in very system level sort of processes for these sorts of things. So this is a commission that I did for a music producer mate of mine who said he'd give my band a free single if I made him a guitar pedal. So I was pretty stoked to be able to do that. And this is what came out of it. It's a stereo fuzz, which basically it takes the left and right channel and it puts each channel through a separate fuzz circuit. And what that means is that we can get different timbre of sound in each of those channels, and when it comes out in the other end, you get a really interesting sort of spectral wideness happening. So he has always wanted a pedal like this, and I was like, yeah, I can do that, no worries. As you can see, it was a lot larger of a project than I had planned, and fitting it all into the enclosure was quite, despite planning, a difficult endeavor. But you know, it really taught me breaking down some of these systems into smaller pieces and then building them from the ground back up again, because it helps with, you know, intertwining all of those elements, which kind of relates to some of the stuff that I've been doing more recently, which is some audio reactive works in TouchDesigner. So most of these works I'm doing in collaboration with a friend of mine who is currently over in London. He is from a graphic design background and trying to learn TouchDesigner for a very similar thing. He plays in bands, and me being technical but not necessarily having that creative background, I was looking to collaborate with someone that, you know, would be able to help bridge that gap. You know, I think very much in maths, and that's fantastic, but when you want something to look a little cool and not just by the numbers, it was definitely helpful to have some creative input, which the second work, which was kind of a spontaneous thing that happened last weekend when we'll tell you more about Stable Confusion in a moment, but when we were doing some shows in Melbourne for Stable Confusion, we decided just to do some extra visuals for one of the opening acts, which, yeah, Sophie kind of inputted in creatively, and it ended up being a really fun experience. But yeah.
So we are, as you can see, just two people hanging out with with different skills and different backgrounds, and I think that what's really nice about working in a collective and in a studio is that I don't think anyone really has a proper formal education in what we're doing, because there isn't really a formal education in what we're doing. So everybody is bringing their personal practices. Everybody has learned most of what they're doing off YouTube. And you come together and you combine all these skills and you can make just big things that are so much bigger than either of us would have ever imagined. Like this one, which is just over the road. This is for the Terracotta Warriors exhibition, and this piece was the Emperor's Tomb. Pat also worked on this. Pat will regret coming to this talk by the end of it, because I'm going to point at him all the time. This one was in Unreal Engine, Pointcaster, and TouchDesigner. This pushed everybody that worked on it so much further than anything we'd done before then, because it was unhinged. We had a 3-month timeline. We're working in Unreal Engine, so there's 1,000 computers. It's very big. So testing it meant that we had to find a space where we could set up all the projectors. Getting the projectors, because the actual projectors we were using were in Perth, was really hard. One of them was borrowed off me. That one actually wasn't mine. It was the galleries that I was borrowing, and then we sub-borrowed it. And it became this thing where even though the final product that you see looks so beautiful and so proper, and you imagine that everyone who's making it is at Team Lab, doing 1,000 things, it's actually just a whole bunch of people in Piermont, Sydney being building a cardboard cutout model, trying to work out how we're gonna get enough kind of points to track everyone working through the water.
Even the there's, you can't see in this image, but there's a huge amount of light panels. I've spent 2 weeks in like Tom, our creative director's garage, like building and then putting them together and then shipping them across. So yeah, it's very just, no one has any professional experience in that sense. We're just kind of, doing what we do.
Yeah, like Jarrod's just sitting there soldering at his desk. We need more safety gear. Yeah. But I think that is to say that like this work and some of the other works that I am going to show of junior majors, they're the same as like my personal practice. It's just like with everything that we do, we build a new skill that can come into the next one. And for everyone that comes through junior major, like Pat, for instance, he then works with everybody else there and they benefit from his skills too. And yeah, so I think that's like something that's really lovely about working this collaborative way. This is another work that we did called Beyond Endings. This was at Mod Museum in Adelaide. This one was great because it was about essentially end-of-life technology, and you would have like a job interview with this metahuman to see that if you could work at this like eternal life, which is this kind of science fiction, like speculative end-of-life tech company that we created. The metahumans that we used were essentially like, what do you call it in games when they're not?
NPCs?
Yeah, they're like, it's like a, thank you. I've got 7 brain cells. It was like using this technology built for like NPCs. So we like fed in the script, we built like kind of all the infrastructure, and they could have this interview with you live. What is really exciting about working in this space is that like this technology had like just been built. What's really devastating about working in this space is this technology was not very stable. And the exhibition went for a year. And that is such a long time. And insane things happened. Like one day we woke up and one of the metahumans was just speaking Spanish. And we didn't know why. And it turned out that that was happening globally. And there was some poor artist, I think in like France or something, who was like presenting their PhD work who had used the same system that we had used to build these. And it was like, yeah, just Spanish globally. It took us ages to undo it. And so these things would happen all the time. And then sometimes like something would break and you would have to work back along the chain. You're like, is it the computer? Is it this like metahuman software? Is it this other thing? Is it the technical team that's on site because they might be like doing like a firewall update for their internet security? And this is all happening while we're over in like Sydney and we're not in Adelaide, so we can't just like walk over and fix it. And I feel like Jarrod got a lot of those like late
a lot of stressed calls.
I think what we really learned from this is that if we're using experimental technology, do it in something that isn't going to be live for a year. And this is going back to like an early junior major work that like predates both of us, but I just think it's nice to show this kind of journey of the motion tracking work. This work was for the powerhouse Ultimo in Sydney, and essentially it was looking at the idea of like train systems and kinetic movement. And I feel like when you look at this, and this was only I think 2022, and you look at this, you can see just like the dramatic growth that can happen when you're just a whole bunch of people together making things all the time, and the like scale that you can start to reach, which is again far more than either of us could have like ever done by ourselves.
I think it's also probably good to point out like collaboration has been one of the most significant factors of this, because one of the programs we use, Pointcaster, to do a lot of our tracking that was used in both of those projects is developed by Matt Hughes, and he's open sourced it, and over that period, as we've done more projects, he's developed it and it's gotten better and has more features, and so we're able to do more with it in the work that he's collaborating with us on.
And Matt Hughes is amazing because like Pointcaster came out of his PhD project. And he is like similarly to both of us, like just an independent practitioner who was excited to see Pointcaster used in all of these different ways. And every time we use it, we can feed back into the development of the software, and it becomes this really nice thing where it's like an ecosystem that we're all a part of. So this is the work that we're like sort of basing the workshop around, and it's called Stable Confusion. Jordan, who's not in the room but worked with Pat and April on the Picker work, was like instrumental in this. If you are in Sydney and you Google TouchDesigner, his website is like the first to come up, and that is because he is so good at TouchDesigner. And we built this one entirely in TouchDesigner. So we worked with a band called Worlds Only that are an ambient like improvisational group. And that was very exciting, but also I think quite terrifying, because when you're doing a live visual interpretation of a musical act, often you hope that they have songs and maybe they're playing them in an order with breaks so that you can like be like, no, this song's coming. And the set is mostly the same. And that is not necessarily the case with Worlds Only, because it's ambient music and it's like improv based. Also, what's really exciting and interesting about Worlds Only is they have, you know, like there's so many of them. There's 7 for the for this like lot of performances, and it features spoken word. And that was something that was really interesting to us as well, because we were like, okay, this is a very distinctive part of this ambient group. So how can we like bring this into the forefront? Because it's improvisational, so much of the music happens like between the different players. So we wanted to create a system that we could like make visuals from that was representative of this, and not necessarily like putting our artistic idea of what the music was, but like really drawing from them. So in TouchDesigner, we went out to the band and we got them to send us a whole bunch of videos from their phones, and we used that to create a data set that we would live draw from. We then, and this is where like a significant part of the work came in, we then put together like this grid format, and then Jordan painstakingly created like 1,000 tiny, very specific like color and noise related filters so that everything would look like distinct and kind of aesthetically cohesive, because again, we're getting like random videos off people's phones. Then we used Whisper AI, which is a TouchDesigner plugin, which is like a live transcription software, to take a direct feed from the spoken word artists like Chain into one of our computers. We also had a stable diffusion plugin, so whenever we would go between either of the videos from the band, it would then kind of enter in this like hallucinative state. The prompts for the stable diffusion were also with the we preloaded a bunch, but then they were mostly drawn live from what the vocalist was saying, which was a way, so if he's saying something about like bugs, for instance, bugs would then appear. This system was incredible to build and is so hard to travel with. When we built it, we thought we would do it as a one-off for this festival soft center. We decided to do it because they had a really big LED screen, and we were interested in finding new ways to use kind of experimental technology that wasn't up for a year because of the Spanish thing. So we thought this would be a good way to do that. What we didn't consider is what it would look like if people kept programming it, and people have kept programming it. So last weekend, Jarrod and I went down to Melbourne with 2 giant Pelican cases with full stack computers, which is better than the first time when we rocked up to the festival with a server rack, but it is still not particularly flexible. Yeah. And so I think this is like a very exciting project. We're really proud of it, but it is also like another moment where we have realized that working in a museum space and in a public, like in the public realm, we've been putting in these big computers so that they can last a year, and we haven't ever really thought about that kind of flexibility. And now we need to reassess our practice as a studio to work out, if we go on tour,
how do the GPUs not like bump out during travel?
And oh yeah, the GPUs keep dumping out.
The GPUs unseated every time we move.
So like we would get to like Acme, where we did a version of this, and then we would have to take the GPUs of the computer out and put them back in. And so this comes back to this thing where it's like, this obviously looks very professional and adult and well documented. But actually, it's like me shining like my phone torch while Jarrod tries to find like a screw to rebuild a computer side of stage. So I think for every digital immersive thing that you see from now until the end of days, just remember that like the people that are behind making it, there's always this messiness and this liveness, because the technology is changing all the time. And I think if we ever get to a point where it's running really smoothly, then we'll know that we're not pushing ourselves enough.
Exactly.
All right, should we do it?
Let's dive in.
All right.
So I'll do a little, I'll try to keep it quick because I want everyone to dive in and start working as quickly as possible, because I think personally with TouchDesigner, it's the best way to learn. So for anyone that doesn't really know what TouchDesigner is, TouchDesigner is it's a real-time visual development platform. And so what that means, comparing it to other, Adobe After Effects and all of those sorts of programs that you would know of, is that there's not you don't press a render button to have the image come out. It's constantly generating, and you can affect it and see how it reacts in real time. It also is incredibly versatile. You can interact with DMX, MIDI, you could have your own sensors and use MQTT, which all of this might be jargon at this point, but what it means is that kind of any project, whether it just be in the digital space or interacting with the real world, TouchDesigner is capable of achieving that. I've just pulled together a few sort of references. I've put the Instagrams of these artists below so you can check them out yourselves. But I just thought all of these were sort of great references on the versatility of TouchDesigner. So obviously the first one is taking like just a voice input and treating that as if there's breath, it'll blow the dandelion away. This one is more hand gestures and sort of triggering certain effects based on the orientation of her hands. This one is using MIDI via TouchDesigner, if it wants to load. So this is where you can see underneath they're drawing all the MIDI into TouchDesigner, but also triggering visual effects at the same time in TouchDesigner. Then we love point clouds. We've talked about Point Caster, but this is using just an old Xbox Kinect that's been mounted on top of a camera. So kind of taking both just the flat 2D image and the point cloud depth data at the same time, and then cutting between the two in TouchDesigner to give some really awesome depth effect in parallel to just the standard video. And then this one is more of a physical installation, just because I think it's important to represent, I'm a hardware guy. I think hardware's awesome. So this is sort of just, more hardware-based TouchDesigner project that I thought was really cool and shows sort of how versatile it is.
I would say if you leave here today and you just want to do the base level thing, follow TouchDesigner on Instagram, because it will really show you like the true scope of how you can use it. And for the first little bit, you'll be like, I don't understand how this like node-based thing can end up making 10,000 things. And then one day you'll wake up and your brain will just have like processed it enough, and it will make sense that it's all just about like, different flows and chains and connecting them together.
Exactly. So quick run through the basics before we dive in. We'll go over this multiple times, so don't worry if you don't remember right now. But quickly, the tab key, that's going to be the key that we use the most. It opens up our op create menu. So this is where we pick all of the nodes we want to use and drag them into our network, which is if you've got TouchDesigner open, you'll see it's sort of the grid. I'll get mine up in a second to work along with you. The next is the sort of display and render flags. So this just gives you some quick options in terms of what you might want to display on the background and see what's happening within that node viewer, which will probably make more sense once we've dived in. This is the viewer flag. So if you're doing big projects like we do on Stable Confusion and you're pushing your computer right to the edge, or if you've got an older laptop that might be struggling a little bit, you can turn all of some nodes, they will all generate sort of a little viewer that shows you what's happening in that particular node. You can just turn that off, so then it reduces the load on your computer. We've got the parameter window, which is just where it's the settings for each particular node, and that's where we'll be working in mostly today. And then there's middle clicking, or you can right click and go info, and that'll show you sort of the exact, what's happening in that node in a more like technical view. So you've got like resolution, aspect, and that can be really helpful for debugging. So just super quickly, some of the basic kinds of nodes. We've got SOPs, which are surface operators. So these will be where we handle any kind of 3D geometry. 3D geometry only really lives in SOPs. So this could be creating just a 3D box, a grid, and then others will be more like affecting that grid, adding noise to it, or plenty of other different effects that TouchDesigner gives. The next is tops, which are our texture operators. So this is all pixels. So this will be any videos, images. If you're wanting to do like RGB masks, anything like that will be done using tops. Chops, these are, I love the rhyming. Chops are all of our brain data. So it's all of, it looks more like raw signal, I suppose. And it's going to be maybe an analog sensor input or audio or just a simple counter. So it's our like numbers and signals. And then finally, mats. And so mats are what they kind of tell our 3D textures what to look like. Without mats, you kind of will just get like a very blank, there won't be any shadows, anything, it'll just be a blank 3D object. But mats will kind of tell TouchDesigner how light works, how shiny to make something look, what color to make it. So I touched a little bit earlier on how my brain works in sort of system thinking, and I think that when you're diving into TouchDesigner, systems thinking is like a much easier way to approach things because all of these problems become a lot smaller. So the two systems we're kind of going to be making today, we're going to create, it's audio-reactive fluff is what I'm calling it, but it'll be made up of two separate systems. The first is our generative 3D and render system. So that's where we're going to create our fluff that we want to react. And then the second system is our audio analysis system, and that's where we're going to take our audio input, which could be a mic or an audio file like a song, and we're going to get, extract data and information from that we're then going to use to affect parameters within our generative 3D system. And that's what's going to give us that sort of live, reactive feel.
And my brain does not work in systems thinking. So along the way, I will be adding like a lot of like allegories as to how I made TouchDesigner work for my brain. So prepare for a lot of me being like, imagine it's like a room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if everyone's opened TouchDesigner on their laptops, the first thing to do is you will have a little system, base system. We're just going to delete that. And then while you guys are doing that, I'm just going to get TouchDesigner open on my screen.
So just press Shift, highlight them all, and delete it.
Thank you.
We are starting from scratch today. Feel free to go back. That will come up whenever you start a new TouchDesigner file. So I encourage you to go back later and like explore it.
Oh, sorry.
No, take your time.
Mouse? Cool.
All right. You can sit down if you like, sweetheart.
Thank you. I'm going to do that. Just move over. Then I just need, oh wait, okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull in our SOP. So I'll run through a few steps and then probably go back and explain in a little more detail once we've done them. So the first thing we're going to do is if you press Tab, it'll open up the Ops Select dialog. And once this is open, you'll see up the top, you've got your list of different operator types. So you can select any of these to sort of see what operators are available. And the first one we're going to do is we're going to go into SOPs, and we're going to grab the grid operator. So once you click on it, it'll give you like a little white box that you can move around. and then you're just going to click anywhere and it'll drop it there. Then, once you've got your first grid SOP in, we're going to do the same thing again, tab, and then we're going to look for a noise SOP. So if I can find it, there we go. And we're just going to drop it next to it. And you'll see we're getting a little error, and that's because we don't have any input to our noise SOP, and it is a node that needs an input. So we're going to click on our little connector, and we're going to drag between the two, and you should see that we can kind of connect it up. And then once they've connected, we're going to let go, and we can kind of see that our noise is now affecting our grid.
If you want to go real close into the noise, just use a 2-finger scroll, and you'll be able to see it nice up and close, and then you can scroll out to see your full chain.
Everyone going all good? No one's having problems?
It's amazing.
Awesome. Oh. Yeah.
Very good.
Awesome. So we're then going to do the exact same thing again, and we're going to put in a fractal SOP.
So tab and then fractal.
Where are we? F.
I know, it's
like,
every time I'm like,
it's right above grid.
How do we spell fractal? Like, this will be me the whole time. Gorgeous.
And then once again, connect the two, and boom, we can see we've got a really crazy looking thing there. So now the final thing we're going to do before I stop and kind of explain what's going on here is we're going to do, once again, same thing, and we're going to drop in a null SOP. Where are we? Null. So just while everyone's kind of getting that up and running, I'll explain sort of what's happening here. So our first grid SOP, it's what's called a generator node. So when you go into the op create menu, you'll see all of these ones that are a little bit darker. So they're generator nodes, and that means that they kind of create something within the TouchDesigner network, and they don't necessarily need an input in order to function. So our grid, that's why our grid is our first in the chain. We want to create or generate a grid, and basically this grid is just a bunch of points in 3D space. So they've got an X, Y, and a Z coordinate that is like 1, 1, 1, and then 1, 1, 2, and it iterates across, and there's a bunch of these points in a grid. Where then, we've got this almost sending it via a signal is how I kind of like to imagine it, to our next SOP, which is our noise SOP. And what our noise SOP is doing is it's just basically adding some randomness to each of these points. And that's why we're kind of getting this sort of like blanket in the wind effect, because each of these points are sort of being moved and have a being in different spots, and that when that sort of generates across the grid, when we've got our white frame, we get this like blanket in the wind effect. The next SOP is a fractal SOP, and this is somewhat similar to a noise in some ways, but what's kind of happening here is on the sort of perpendicular to the grid, we're kind of getting these like bumps out. It kind of, I like to think of the noise as making the whole grid move, but then the fractal is kind of giving the grid a roughness. And then finally, our null SOP actually does nothing, but that's why we put it there. It's good practice to, at the end of sort of a singular chain within a system, to put a null chop down, because it means that if you change something before that, it's not going to have ongoing effects down the line in terms of when we're trying to use different parameters to affect certain nodes to affect other parameters, sorry. So you might have naming conventions, say we're using fractal 1. If I then go put something after fractal 1, but I'm referencing this node, anything that happens afterwards isn't going to affect what I'm doing. So if you make sure you've got a null at the end of your chain, it just makes using these sort of segments a lot easier and keeps them clearer.
Yeah, it's
like an autosave almost. It kind of creates like a memory point in the chain.
Not really. It's more. Yeah, I'd say kind of more like a full stop, and it means you can kind of add words in front, and you might be able to have you might make the sentence beforehand. It might get all jumbled, but it means that because you've got a full stop, we know the next sentence is fresh, and we can start rereading again from there, and it'll make sense. So.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know how the noise is generated? Like how the calculation for the randomness is?
Look, I'm not 100%, but I do know that there are a range of different noises that are available in TouchDesigner, and there's a noise for each type of operator as well. So there'll be texture like a noise top is like a very common thing to use, which is like kind of more like a pixely, like what do you call it, like a static image sort of grain. But yeah, I'm sure there would be documentation somewhere though, potentially.
And you can with all of these points, you can adjust what it's doing.
Yeah.
So you can change like the impact of the noise, the harmonics, the speed.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So the next thing we're going to want to do is we've got this 3D geometry, and we kind of, if we want to render it, we've got to create a sort of render system in TouchDesigner, which is another very common thing that if you end up, going on and using TouchDesigner a lot, you will just create this every time.
We got to put the grid in a room.
We do.
Essentially,
Yeah.
it's like abstractly in kind of like the abstract space of TouchDesigner, and we've got to set up a little home for it to live, and then light it and give it a camera.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just
Floating.
It's just floating. It's nowhere. So what we're going to do. This one, I find this a little bit easier to do for, we're going to use a comp, but what I do is I'm going to click the connector, and I'm going to click and hold and drag it out. I'm still holding, and then I'm going to press tab. And that'll open up our op dialog, but what it will do is it's going to automatically connect the null SOP that we've just used to whatever we drop in next, as long as it's a compatible connection. So we're going to go into the comp tab up top, and in this first list, you're going to see there's a geometry comp. So to give just a really quick rundown on comps, comps are sort of what I like to think of, they're like a folder of nodes. They're like a pre-baked sort of system that has an in and an out, and you don't kind of have to worry about what's going on inside it. You can if you want, and you could make your own, but these ones are all just pre-made by TouchDesigner, and so we're going to grab the geometry one. You can see it's already connected, and then we drop it in, and we get our grid, and it's now in a room. But how do we get that into an image? Well, we're going to need to get some light on it. So we're going to go tab again, and same in this same column, we're going to go down to the light, and we're going to drop it in. Now, it's not going to be connected to anything quite yet. We're just going to drop it in and leave it there. And then we're going to go tab once more and grab the camera comp. And we're going to drop it in. So now we've got all of these elements. We can render this into a video image, basically. And we're obviously, because we're going to have like a 2D image, we're going to want to use tops because they're our pixel operators. So if you go to the top menu in the Op Create dialog, so tab again and top, and then go to the render. And then when you drop it in, you should see that it automatically pulls in all three of those comps. And that's because, once again, this is a very, very standard sort of system in TouchDesigner. And we can see now that the grid is now on our image. I think it's probably easy to see now that we've got this, how sort of these sort of all work together. So I'm just going to click this, which basically just turns off this comp, and you'll see, Oh, maybe it won't. Ah, I thought it was going to disappear. That's all right. I'll delete it, and then that way you can kind of see that my render, there's no light, and that means that there's nothing that the render top can use to say, oh, light is bouncing this way, or it's going to look like this. So that's it was a very large learning curve for me when I was trying to do my first render, and I was like, why are all of my things gray? Like, so yeah, so that's our basic render system, and because that is the end, we're going to put a null top just at the end there.
We love the nulls.
Love the nulls. So I know that it's I know that it's the end because obviously I know where we're going with this project. But normally I will have like just in my head sort of there'll be like a little element that I'm trying to create. So for example, in that first one, it's like, oh, I want to create the 3D object that I'm going to affect. So I create the 3D object and sort of the things that I want to put in that as effects, like the noise and the fractal, and then I'll go, okay, cool, I'm done with it, I'm going to chuck a null at the end, and then if I'm coming back to change anything, I just put everything before that null, and I know that I'm all good.
It's very much like, I don't know if anyone's like came up through Adobe, but it's very much like how you put things into folders in Photoshop, or like pre-comps in After Effects. Everyone does it slightly differently, but it's like that file organization is what means that when you like go back after a year and look at it, you can work out like the structure and sort of how you worked.
Yeah.
Also, one quick thing is when you have a null, it has to be the same color as the thing that came before it. So like we had our blue null when we were like using SOPs, and then you need a purple null when you're using tops.
Yeah.
It's just it's gotta match its friend.
Yeah.